All right, so most of you know that wonder means to be surprised or in awe of something that is unexpected or beautiful. And you probably could also imagine that wonder means to ponder something or to meditate on something. But did you know that wonder can also mean to feel doubt? When I read that, it reminded me of this time back in 2012 when I heard Joe Montana speak. And I was at this restaurant conference. There were probably 1,000 people in a ballroom in Los Angeles. And it was all people who had multi-unit restaurants. And so there were big guys like Jimmy John's Sandwiches. And there were little emerging companies like Mendocino Farms. And I think Kimball Musk was even there, who's the brother of the founder of Tesla, working on an urban farming idea and how to link that to restaurants and schools, actually. So it was this really exciting conference, and Joe Montana's speaking. And during his speech, he says something that really resonates with me. He says that he's driven by fear. My parents, my coworkers, all my friends, they have teased me my whole life because I, too, am driven by fear. Started when I was a kid, it followed me through college, definitely throughout my career, for sure starting my own company, and probably still to this day. I can remember when I was very first starting Salt and Straw, my friend Chris Jones stole me away right before we were going to open on Alberta Street to attend this positive visualization seminar. It was in downtown Portland with Joe Dispenza. Anybody know Joe? Pretty great. It was multiple days, and you know, when you're just getting ready to open, you're literally like, I'm ordering toilet paper and painting the walls and training people, and I was barely sleeping. But this was just super important to me, so I took time out. I think it was 2 or 3 days to attend this seminar. And of course, they're taking us on detailed guided meditations, and I was thinking about what my store is going to look like, what the employees are going to look like, what our customers and our community. And Chris Jones and I are just on fire. We're like, this is the best thing ever. This is changing our lives. This is so exciting. And we get done with the whole seminar, and we're walking out one evening. The sun was setting. We're standing on the corner in Portland, and she says to me, so how are you feeling about the week coming up? Because she knew we were, getting ready to open. And I said, well, I'm hoping for the best, but I'm planning for the worst. Her mouth fell to the ground. I can still picture her face. She's like, you the same person who was just in that seminar with me for 3 days? Like, were you just talking about how that changed your life and how exciting that was? And I just shook my head and I said, Chris, it's just how I am, and I walked off. She still gives me a hard time about that to this day. No exaggeration. You see, I had carried this idea of Salt and Straw around with me since 1996. I was living in Portland then for a little while, and I was struck by the community feeling that I experienced here. I'd never experienced that anywhere else. And for some reason, I thought an ice cream shop would be the best way to reflect that. It could be a place you could run into your neighbors, spend time with friends and family, and just have a moment that was all good. So I started working on that idea. I even started looking for real estate. And then I started to wonder if that was a good idea. My dad had gone bankrupt starting his own business when I was in high school, and so as I wondered and wondered about this, I decided that is definitely not a good idea. It ruins families. It was really hard on my life. I'm not going to start my own business. And luckily, I had this really great gig in corporate America to go back to. I had started with Starbucks coffee when there were 30 stores. It was a tiny company. And I went back to work there. I think I left when there were a little over 3,000. I went on to work at Yahoo during the dot-com bubble, I guess it's called now, in the early days. And I even got to take a gig with Bono, working for Red, which is the company he started to raise money for AIDS in Africa. And here he is, putting this international crisis on our front doorstep and finding a way to solve it. And that really planted a seed in me. And at that point, I thought, is there a way I can combine this passion I've been carrying around for community with my corporate success? So I end up in Portland for a weekend, back in Portland for a birthday party. And I met a guy in a bar, which doesn't usually end well. But we fell in love, and we adopted 3 kids, and I moved to Portland, and I started this ice cream company. And that's the end of my speech. You can find wonder in bars. No. So I land back in Portland, and before all of that happened, I'm just a starry-eyed girl in love, and I'm back in Portland, and I'm wondering, what should I do with my life? And I can remember sitting at the kitchen table with Mike Sunday morning, the sun's coming in, and he's reading the New York Times because he's good about doing things like that. And out falls the New York Times magazine, and the front cover says, Humphrey Slocum Ice Cream, starting this new artisan ice cream movement out of San Francisco. Have you ever done this? I banged my fists on the table, raised my other fist to the heavens. That was my idea. I thought of this in 1996, and now someone else is doing it. I threw a huge, that was my idea temper tantrum. And once I got done, as Mike does, he looked at me calmly and said, well, why don't you do it? Do you have anyone in your life who's like that, who kind of turns your wonder into action? I sometimes call it calling me on my bullshit. So he did that, and it set me off on this whole wonder trail of, I wonder if I can get over this fear and start my own company. I wonder if I can take what I've learned from Starbucks and all of these great experiences that I've had and apply it to starting something myself. And I wonder, can I really make a difference with an ice cream company? So, spoiler alert, I decided to do it. And all these years later, actually about 6 months ago, I was in Northern California, and I got invited to a very impressive dinner at Walter Robb's house, who's one of the founders of Whole Foods. And who's sitting next to me? Joe Montana. I'm like, oh my God. So I get up my nerve to tell him my story of hearing him speak, and I said, can you just explain what you meant by I'm driven by fear? Because I've carried that around for the past 8 years, and I talk about it a lot, and he laughed and he said, yeah, I'm driven by fear. I know I'm gonna succeed. That's a given for me. But, well, he's Joe Montana. He's a 4-time Super Bowl quarterback. His nickname is Joe Cool. He keeps it cool under pressure. He knows he's going to succeed, but he said, I'm driven by fear. And it reminded me of this quote by Jimmy Connors, the tennis player. And he said, I hate losing even more than I love winning. And I think that's true for a lot of champions out there. They will do anything to not lose, and they're driven by not losing. And a lot of people want to win. But for a lot of people, fear is not an inspiration. Fear causes you to quit and freeze, kind of like it did for me back in 1996. And so I think in this new chapter of my life, and I think about that conversation I had with Joe, and I really think that that's been one of the keys to my success, is realizing that fear can actually be an inspiration. And I was thinking about how you can turn worry into wonder and turn that into work. And so I would just ask you, as you're thinking about what's coming up in your life, maybe you're working on a huge project right now. Maybe as you look at your calendar, you have something big coming up. Are you turning worry into work? Are you letting that fear of what could go wrong inspire you? Or are you making that the excuse to quit what you're doing? And that question, what if? What if we turn that into, what are we going to do about it? What if it's the biggest success ever? What if no one shows up? We can either take this worry and change it into wonder and cause us to work just a little bit harder than we think we should, do a little bit more than we think we could, or we can use it as an excuse to stop. So then I went on to start the company. And it's sort of the next chapter of wonder for me. We've grown. We have 19 stores. We just opened a store in Disneyland, which is super exciting. Thank you. And the wonder that kind of bubbles up in this next chapter of my life is I wonder if I can stay true to my values as I grow or as I take on new projects. And I wonder if it even really matters. So when I started my company, I didn't have any money. And I wrote a business plan, and it was the year 2010, keep that in mind. And I went around to banks and showed them a business plan to open an ice cream shop in Portland, Oregon, with great earnest, thinking I would get a loan. Not only is that funny, but it was 2010, which was the height of the Great Recession. So these bankers, these very nice bankers I met with, gave me lots of good feedback for my business plan, sharpened it up, did not give me any money. I decided to get the courage up to send it to a couple of investors. And I didn't know this world very well, so I didn't cast a very wide web. And this was in 2010, and even in 2010, this was a little bit archaic. One of them sent the business plan back to me in the US mail. And I opened it up, and I can still remember, I pulled it out of the envelope. It was covered in red ink. The guy had corrected a few spelling errors, which I appreciated, but more than anything, he wrote across the top in really big letters, "You cannot do this. Who do you think you are, Starbucks?" And I did tell Howard Schultz that story later, and he said he wished he had seen the business plan early on, but that's a story of turning wonder into like kicking yourself. Like, I wish I had shown it to him. But anyway, back to this investor. So I threw that business plan away as fast as I could because I didn't want that sense of doubt to like sink into my pores and make me stop. But what he saw in that business plan is that we were going to invest a little bit more in this company than was logical, than was traditional, than what most experts would advise you to do in terms of what we were going to pay employees and the benefits and how we were going to pay for ingredients and orchestrate our recipes. It didn't make sense to him. And so to us, it was like, well, if we're going to start this company, we want to start something that's going to make the world just a little bit better than when we found it. And those people who come into contact with us, we want them to leave with a little bit more than when they met us. Otherwise, it's not worth doing. So when we started out, we're here in the Willamette Valley. Maybe you all have allergies like I do. That's because we have an amazing agriculture scene. We knew we were going to make ice cream using seasonal ingredients, but we soon came to realize that this idea of a great community gathering place could really be reflected in the flavors that we were going to make. So we started the company. We didn't get any money. I cashed in my 401k, sold my house, had a garage sale, put Mike's house up for collateral for a very small loan, God bless him, and we're off on our way making these ice cream flavors. My cousin Tyler has joined me, and we quickly realized that beyond the really great agriculture here, this sense of community can be translated into our product. And that's reflected in collaborations that we ended up doing with Laurelhurst Brewing to create a brown ale ice cream, Olympia Provisions to candy their bacon and turn it into ice cream, Rogue Creamery with pear and blue cheese, Smith Tea Makers, The Symphony, the list goes on and on and on. So for us, there's this word called terroir in the wine industry, and it means to have a taste of place. And we wanted our ice cream to have that here in Portland. Fast forward a few years in, we found ourselves in conversations with some folks in Los Angeles. And sort of organically, we were getting ready to open a store there, just through some relationships that we had. And we were sitting across the table from each other, trying to figure out how to do this. We made pretty good ice cream in Portland. We could probably make more of it, ship it to Los Angeles. They'd probably like it. But something didn't seem quite right about that. So instead, we decided we would take an extra year before we opened, get to know the local scene there, the local artisans, the local makers, the local dairies, and act as if we're starting a brand new company, and create a menu that is local to that city alone. We thought, let's turn growth on its head a little bit. It doesn't have to mean mass sameness. Our values should be reflected in this growth. I had to laugh because if you open any business book, it says, you should grow to make more of what you're making, sell it, and make more money. It's against everything I had learned in corporate America for the 20 years I spent there. We were sort of turning this idea on its head. But we decided that if we're going to do it, this has to be the way we want to move forward. And so we signed a lease, we created a new menu, we opened a kitchen in Los Angeles, and people responded so well to that. And to me, as we then started to open in other cities across the West Coast, we took that philosophy forward. So this idea that growth has to be like a race to the bottom line and all about money and mass sameness and dumbing things down, I think this is our opportunity to change that around and make it mean something else. So I would just ask you, as you think about the values that got you started, do they matter? Do people care? Does it matter to you? And how can you carry those through? How can you remember that spark that got you started and honor that as you make decisions to grow the projects you're working on, the company you're working for, your career, all of the things that are important to you? So then I would go on to my third and final question about wonder. And I have to tell you, I've been researching you guys, this CreativeMornings audience. And it says online that this is a group of people who come together with passion and purpose. And that you're a big-hearted community that comes together once a month to support each other and raise the bar on what it means to be creative. So what does it mean to be creative? And how does it relate to wonder? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's the creative community's opportunity, maybe even responsibility, to create wonder in this world that badly needs it right now. Maybe it's the creative community's responsibility to see, create, and scale wonder. So let's talk about those three a little bit. What does it mean to see wonder? When I think about our own stores, one of the things that makes me the happiest is when I walk in and I see a group of people who obviously didn't know each other 15 minutes ago. They don't come from the same career path. They probably don't even have the same politics. They're definitely not the same religion. Sometimes they don't even speak the same language. And they're talking about this flavor that came out, this pancake flavor that came out. That idea that wonder can bring people together is probably one of the things that I'm most excited about when I think about our company. And I wanted to share this letter that I just got this week that I think illustrates this point. She's writing a letter, first and foremost, to lobby that the pancake flavor become a permanent flavor on the menu. But then she goes on to say, secondly, my younger brother is autistic, and as a result has struggled with fitting in his whole life, even within our own family. During the summer, our mom would regularly cook ribs and provides us with a beautiful dinner spread to include fresh fruit and baked beans. Since I can remember, my brother would put cut up strawberries into his baked beans. In response, everyone at the table would groan, gag, tell him how gross and weird he is. So naturally, when I saw your berries, beans, and barbecue sauce ice cream flavor, true story, I had to take my brother with me to try it. My husband and I picked him up, drove him down there, and then waited in line for 30 minutes to get into the shop and get a taste. We told the young man that was serving us about how my brother always ate his beans and berries together. And the employee, Jonah, exclaimed, "Finally, someone gets it." After a few minutes with my brother, it is usually apparent that he has some challenges, and I am sure this was not lost on Jonah, who was serving us. My brother sampled the flavor, then ordered a scoop and a cone, and the three of us proceeded to the register for payment, and Jonah told the cashier, "This one is on us. He's my first customer to order this flavor today." Although this was the reason he gave for comping my brother's cone, it was clear to me that he knew it was a special moment for my brother. Because in that moment when he said, "Finally someone gets it," I think my brother thought, "Wow, someone finally gets me, and they don't think I'm weird." My brother smiled from ear to ear and scarfed down his ice cream, and I just wanted to write you about Jonah and tell you how incredibly thoughtful he was. So when I hear that story, it makes me cry. But when I hear that story, I think of this juxtaposition. So on the left, there's weird. And on the right, there's wonder and wonderful. And on the left, there's also wrong. Because so many people would say, beans and barbecue sauce, that's wrong. But what if it's not wrong? Is it our opportunity in the creative industry to show that something that seems weird, something that doesn't fit in our normal purview of what we think is normal? Nowadays, when all we hear on the news is how the things that are different are driving us apart and sending us into our own corners, and we're becoming more and more isolated. But what if we have the opportunity to show that what's different can actually be beautiful, and we can be in awe of that, and it can be wonderful? And you can see that. You can see someone in that way, and you can feel seen in that moment. And let's talk about creating wonder. The other thing I love when I walk into our stores is, you'll see it now too. Stand back when people are at the sampling counter, and you'll see people going, "Oh my God!" We call it "oh my God" moments. "Oh my God, I did not think that that would work," and it works. And then they'll go get a friend, and maybe the next day they'll bring them in, and they'll walk up to our scooper, and they'll say, "He's never been here before. He's never had this. Go." No joke. And so it's that moment to really create a moment. We're creating wonder. You know, if I said earlier in the speech that I wonder if an ice cream company can make a difference, I think if you see a line at Salt and Straw, or if we've had any success, it's a sign of the fact that people are craving wonder in their lives right now. We need it. And again, it's our opportunity, I think, as the creative industry to create that and give people something to look at that's different from what we see currently. Speaking about that, I wanted to talk about scaling wonder. So this reminds me of a story of a gentleman who started an enterprise called Z Prize. And he was speaking at the United Nations recently, and you should look into Z Prize, it's amazing. So he was speaking at the United Nations, and he said, there's two kinds of people in the world. There's red capers, and there's blue capers. Red capers are those superheroes who go through the world fighting evil, and we are so grateful for them. But blue capers are the superheroes who aren't fighting evil, they're creating the good that we need in this world. Isn't that why we're here? Isn't that the opportunity to create a new vision, a new path forward, something new to focus on versus what we think is apparent? I don't know about you, but I'm trapped in this 24-hour news cycle of what's wrong. And I know that what we focus on, we create. And we are the creatives. We can change that. We can be blue capers. We can focus on something different. It's up to us to create that vision for the world. So just to wrap things up, we've been talking about wonder, how to see splendor in something surprising. I want you to remember that project that we were talking about earlier, the one that you have coming up that you're trying to grapple with. Are you thinking of that with wonder or worry? Are you kicking yourself with regret? Or are you learning and moving forward with new knowledge? Are you reaching out or are you pulling back? There's shortcuts out there. There's all kinds of experts that'll tell you, that's not the way to do it. You could make more money this way. You could save more money this way. But what are your values telling you? What's in your soul that you know is the right way to proceed? I heard this story on an Oprah podcast because I love Oprah podcasts. And, my 3 kids are African American, so I'm obsessed with learning what it's like to be Black and American. This woman was African American, and she was saying that she's created her whole life philosophy around this idea that she needs to be a little bit better than anyone would ever expect. And she said she was at a big, huge department store one day, and she was shopping. And she got her bag, and she went down the escalator, and as she was about to leave the door, she looked down and saw something had fallen into her bag when she was checking out. It was a handkerchief or something small and silly. And she thought to herself, kind of in a hurry, do I really need to go all the way back upstairs and deal with this handkerchief? And she said before she even finished the thought, she was back on the stairs heading up. She said, no one would have known if I left the store with that stupid handkerchief, but I would know. And as you're thinking about your values and what makes you you, remember that handkerchief. I think of it a lot. So as you go back home and back into your office, how are you going to see wonder? How are you going to see when something's being depicted as weird, that you can replace it with something that will bring people together? How are you going to create wonder in this world, and how are you going to scale it? How are you going to be a blue caper like the Z Prize, who's finding people who are changing the world, celebrating them, funding them, making a difference for good, and using our superpowers for good, quite frankly? So I guess I'll just end with this quote that I love. I wrote it down here. It's from Albert Einstein, because I hear he's a pretty smart guy. He said, "He who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe is as good as dead. His eyes are closed."